The late George Carlin tells a humorous story. He says that one day he walked into a bookstore. Remember what a bookstore is? Remember those days? Right? He walked into a bookstore and he said to the salesperson, "Can you tell me where the self-help books are?" And the salesperson said, "I would, but it would defeat the purpose." Self-help is not what I'll be speaking about today, although it's important. Self-help books focus on self-image. But my thoughts this evening are not how we feel about ourselves. Rather, they're about how we act towards others, about our character. How can Judaism help us to develop better character in ourselves and in our children? This week's Torah portion, Mishpatim, actually has 53 mitzvot. Many of them are ethical mitzvot. One of the ways that Judaism goes about making a better world is not only by giving us societal guidelines, but giving us guidelines how to make a better individual. We make a better world by shaping personal behavior, by elevating our character. I want to acknowledge Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, who has written extensively about this issue over his many books, and some of the ideas that I'm going to share with you are certainly spurned by his thoughts as well. So here are some suggestions, 7 suggestions as to how each of us can elevate our character. The first is the simplest, but I have to say in many ways, it's the most profound. Put character at the top of our agenda. And let me share a practical way to do that. Before we're going to do something, we need to ask ourselves the following question. Is what I am about to do, will it raise my character or will it lower it? And if the response is that it will lower your character, then choose not to do it. By regularly putting character at the top of our agenda, by asking ourselves, will this elevate or lower my character, the entire question of character takes a central spot in your life. The second suggestion I have is to develop a sense of empathy. Put yourself in another person's position. There's a story told in the 19th century in a shtetl in Russia that there's a blizzard. And during the blizzard, the rabbi goes to the richest man in town to raise money to buy wood to heat the houses of the poor. So he knocks on the door of this very wealthy man, and the man invites him in out of the cold, and instead, the rabbi stays on the porch and casually chants with the man about his wife and his children and a bunch of other things. The door is open, and the man is very cold. His teeth are chattering, so he invites the rabbi into the house. The rabbi, though, continues to stand outside and asks more questions about business, about philosophy, about life. And now the man is shivering, and he begs the rabbi to please come inside. But the rabbi continues to stay outside, and he explains to the man that he is there to ask for 100 rubles, 100 rubles to warm houses for the poor. It's a lot of money. The man says, "If I promise to give, will you come inside?" And the rabbi agrees, and he goes inside. The man says, "I'll give you the money right now," and he does. And then he says to him, "Rabbi, if you knew all along you were planning to ask me, why didn't you come out right away and just ask?" And the rabbi said, "If I had come in as soon as you would open the door, you would have taken me into a comfortable chair in the living room. You would have brought out a glass of warm tea. We would have sat by the fire, and I would have asked you for money for heating the houses of the poor, and you would have offered me 5 rubles, maybe 10. But standing outside, you experienced for a few minutes the bitterness of the cold that the poor experience all the time. I wanted you to be feeling that cold when I asked for 100 rubles. We develop empathy by placing ourselves in another person's shoes. By the way, this does not give you permission to make us wait outside if we come to visit you at your home. The third way to develop character is related to this. We should try to imagine what others' lives are like. Indeed, we really can't know what other people's lives are like unless we ask them. So, for example, the next time you're in a cab or an Uber, you might find that the driver may not have been born here in the United States. Ask them about their lives. On the East Coast, I found you'll often meet cab drivers from Pakistan, from the Ivory Coast, from India, from Ethiopia, and they'll often be very happy to share their stories about their lives and how often they left young children along with their wives in the home country in which they came from to come to America to make some money to send it back home, and how they're living often several to a room. When Beverly and I were living in New York, we lived in a building that was built in 1908, and the elevators hadn't been updated. There were no push buttons to get to your floor. Instead, there was a big gate, you know, those big, it was still there. But they had to have a person manage that and be in the elevator all the time. And on our side of the building during the day was a man named Misha. Misha was a Soviet Jew in his mid-50s. And over the years, I came to know him. Turns out that Misha left the former Soviet Union, probably in the early 80s, as I recall. And he was a supervisor in a factory with 50 people that he supervised. It wasn't the most glamorous job in the world to be in an elevator all day. And one day he said to me, "Did you ever wonder why I left the former Soviet Union to come to the United States? I didn't expect to be in an elevator, but I'm here." He said, "I'll tell you why." He said, "I'd rather live in freedom in an elevator than live under tyranny and supervise 55 people." Boy, that's a memory that'll stay with me for the rest of my lives. But we need to ask people and talk to people about what their lives are like. The fourth way we can all go about elevating our character is to believe that everything we do is known to God. When nobody else is around, when no one else is looking, God sees. Some may see this as punitive, that God will know when you do something bad. And it's true. If God knows everything, God knows when we do bad things. And if there's an afterlife, and I hope there is, and I believe there is, then there'll be some sort of accountability. But it also means that when we do something good that God knows, every kind act for a stranger, every large and small thing that you ever do, God knows. And that can give you the strength and the courage to do the right things, especially when no one else is there to see it. And if there's an afterlife, and I believe and I hope there is, well, we'll leave that in God's hands. But we do answer to something higher. The fifth way that we can all help to develop our character is to develop humility. Not false humility. Be proud of your accomplishments, self-esteemed when earned, and that's the key, when earned, when you've worked hard for something, that's an important value. And yet realize that anything that you have accomplished in some way came from God. You may have a great talent for writing, or you may have a great talent for hitting a baseball, or for being a great accountant, or in business in general. You may have a winning personality. Remember, it all came from somewhere. You may have developed it, but somewhere, somehow, that came from God. And that's humbling. And when there's a lack of God in the world, it tends to foster arrogance, because there's nothing higher. And yet, the sense that God gave you those gifts does foster humility. It's a great, great message for children. And having said that, we shouldn't lack self-esteem. You know, you think about the Amidah. You know, the tradition is to bow at the beginning and at the end of the first blessing, and then again at the end of the, I think it's the 17th, Modim Anachnu. Bowing is a show of humility. But there's a fascinating point, it's Talmudic, I'm pretty sure, that says it is also important to straighten up after the blessing. In other words, it's important in life to stand tall and to have a sense of self-esteem. The sixth way that we all can develop better character is to schedule kindness into our day. If need be, literally schedule 15 or 30 minutes into your calendar to do something good for other people, to visit someone who is sick, or to make a phone call on behalf of someone who's looking for work, to call a member of the family, even if it's only once or twice a week. Once or twice a week, it becomes a part of your regular routine in life. And finally, for now, the seventh way to elevate our character, have a long memory. Don't be ungrateful. And here's an illustration from the Torah. The Israelites, our ancestors, had every reason to despise the Egyptians. They were treated horrifically. And only through the grace of God and the 10 plagues were we freed. Yet the Torah commands something, it's in Deuteronomy, which at first blush seems odd. We're told not to abhor an Egyptian, for you were strangers in their land. Don't abhor the Egyptians because you were strangers in their land. Really? Don't abhor them? Hertz, who wrote a very, very thoughtful commentary, has a great insight here. He says, before the Egyptians turned against the Israelites, we entered Egypt during a severe famine, and we were welcomed by the Egyptians. And this is a reminder not to forget that act of kindness. So if I may, I'd like to offer a contemporary example. If you've received something good from another person and the relationship soured, don't diminish the good the person did for you. Have a long memory. If you were married and the marriage ended, try to remember there were indeed good times with your ex-husband or your ex-wife. And if, for example, you're a child and your relationship with your mother or your father is strained, or even if it's estranged, don't allow that break to diminish the good they may have done for you. Have a long memory. It'll elevate our character. Judaism is filled with insights on how to make a better world, but it starts with fashioning a better human being by elevating our character. And as each of us strives to be better and hope that our children and our grandchildren will learn similarly, I think that it's fair to say we can take some collective pride in knowing that the God that we worship, more than anything else, cares about how we treat one another, and that we come from a tradition that has elevated personal ethics to the highest level. That is both humbling, and that is something for which we can all be grateful. Shabbat Shalom.